Hey, what's up, guys? This is Bodie.
This is Shanae.
Hey, this is Jamie McDonald.
What's up? I'm Laverdier.
What's up, y'all? This is Seth Schleter.
Hey, what's up, family? This is Jeremy Rosado, and you are tuned in to Kingdom Builder. Listen, I am so excited for what God's doing in this season. You can check out Kingdom Builder if you're listening or watching. It's an honor to be here, to be a part of this. Keep checking my family out, and check me out wherever you listen to music.
Hey everyone, welcome to Kingdom Builder. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, when I first got into Christian music back in 2004, there were a couple of bands that I really enjoyed and really got into that kind of introduced me to Christian music. You know, bands like Third Day, Pillar, Cutlass were among my favorites, and there were also some solo artists that grabbed my attention as well, like Stephen Curtis Chapman. Jeremy Camp was brand new at the time, and Toby Mac had just branched off from DC Talk to go solo. But back in 2004, I discovered another solo artist that has really resonated with me over the last 20 years. He's an artist that hasn't been in music in a while, and, you know, I am so glad to have him join me today. So if you remember back in the 2000s, he released 6 records over the span of 9 years. And I am so happy and grateful to have Todd Agnew join me today. Todd, how are you doing today, man?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you, man. We were talking pre-interview. Last time I talked to you was back in 2017 when we did a tribute to the late, great Rich Mullins, which, of course, was a huge influence on you musically, and was so glad to be able to go back and feature his music and be able to, you know, introduce him to a whole new generation of fans that may not have known that he had so many great songs other than Awesome God, which, you know, permeated, you know, praise and worship and stuff back then. So I was so glad that you were able to join me for that one, man. It was a lot of fun doing that one.
It was. I mean, Rich is, just a pillar of the Christian music community and history. And I'm shocked now. You know, I teach a songwriting class, and and like every year I'll bring up Rich, and they're like, "Who? We've never heard of him." I'm like, "How can you not know Rich Mullins?" But it's always great to get to talk about his music.
Yeah, and you know, when we did that conversation, that was for the 20th anniversary of his passing in September of
Right.
1997, and here we are in 2025. You know, a few short years, he'll have been gone for 30 years. But like you said, he's one of those artists that, you know, time doesn't forget. The impact that he had on the Christian music industry as a whole is just still, you know, permeates through the music that we have now. And I remember seeing recently, you know, with all of everything that's going on, I remember seeing a video quote from him about not looking to Christian artists for theology, but looking to the Bible and stuff. And I'm like, wow, it's just so profound. Just something that he said, you know, 30 years ago still, you know, rings true in our society today.
Right. Yeah. It was he was such a special artist, and it was a real, you know, a real treasure to get to see him, perform and be influenced by his music. And now, our young artists that are actually learning to write really honestly themselves, this new generation, they're being influenced by a generation of artists that were influenced by Rich, and so we're getting to pass down that music once again.
Yeah. Well, you know, for those watching in today who may not be familiar with you, you recorded and released 6 studio records from 2003 to 2012. Did multiple tours and events over the years. And I remember the first time I saw you was back, I believe it was on the Winter Jam tour in 2004 at Carpenter's Home Church in Lakeland, Florida, where I live. And that was my first introduction to you. But, you know, for people that, you know, are not familiar with you or may be familiar with you and are kind of wondering the same thing as me, you know, where's Todd been the last several years? You know, since releasing the last couple songs that you did for a project in 2017, people are probably wondering, what have you been up to, man?
Yeah, let's see here. I got married, and we have a couple of kids, and so I, really wanted to. I really had to weigh what that looked like. Um, I didn't want to be a dad that like the normal thing for the kids was for me to be gone. And then it was cool when I came home. I didn't want that. I wanted the norm to be me at home. And so over those last couple of records, I was really um, massaging the tour concept and going, what if I only went out every other weekend? And they're like, that's not a tour. That's not how that's not how people do things. But sure enough, there were other people that were like, hey, that would actually work really well for us too. And so we kind of put some things together like that. And then I just got to the point that I was training young worship leaders at church, and I felt like God was just saying, "Hey, you have a choice right now. You can continue to chase the radio thing and try to get the next song on and the next hit, and that'll push the next tour and we'll push the next whatever. Um, or you can kind of turn a corner here and start training the next generation that's going to do this. Because my generation didn't get that. We were kind of we weren't the pioneers of CCM, but me and this group of guys, from Texas and the aughts, we were, the kind of the worship leaders uh, that we were the first worship leaders that got to also have songs on the radio, and we saw all that kind of come together, and we just learned by going out and doing dumb stuff, and going, okay, don't ever do that again. Um, but uh, but I had that opportunity, and I really felt like that was the right direction for me to go. It brought me to DTS, which is Dallas Theological Seminary, and I just started a master's program here, and now it's however many years later, and I'm the department chair of the Media Arts and Worship department at DTS, and I teach worship leadership, songwriting, and then some more general arts courses. We've got Dr. Chan's doing visual art, Dr. Glon's amazing writer. And so, we're just kind of working in those things of uh, what can we do to equip the next generation that's going to serve the church, going to serve the body, and so that's kind of my kids are grown now, and that's kind of what life looks like.
Yeah, when you're like teaching these classes and everything, showing students and teaching them and equipping them with the tools they need, to write their own music, to do what you were doing 20 years ago. Do these kids come into class? Do any of them realize who you are, realize what you did as a career prior to going to seminary?
A few of them. I feel like every year it's less. Um, and I also feel like where we are right now, it's, oh yeah, my mom listened to you. And I was like, yeah, thanks. uh, but uh, but I had a student this past spring that was a really exciting writer. I mean, she's writing some really amazing stuff, and she doesn't know me from Adam as a musician. But once she figured that out, she had questions, and she's like, "Hey, can you play us one of your songs? Um, because we've been hearing you talk about stuff, but what did you actually do?" And I'm like, I don't, because I don't use my stuff very much as examples. And so yeah, it's pretty entertaining. Um, but it's also like it's even a little embarrassing for me to pull something out and go, well, you got to understand this was 20 years ago, so it's dated. the guitars don't sound quite, I feel that. And but they're just learning, and they're trying to incorporate everything they hear into making them better at what they do. And so it's a real privilege to be a part of that.
What songs do you whip out to show them as examples?
That day it was If You Wanted Me from the Better Questions record. Because I was just talking about how when you're writing a song, it's 3.5, 4 minutes. Um, and one of the stumbling blocks in Christian music is in Christian songwriting is we can try to feel like we need to cover the entire Bible and the entire Christian history in every song. And
Yeah.
so we've got a little bit of honest struggle in the first verse, but then we got to put a bow on it and wrap it all up by the chorus. And then once we've wrapped it up, then what's the second verse going to be about? Because we already put a bow on everything.
Hmm.
And I was like, and it doesn't have to be like that. I was like, you can tell the gospel story with an album and use 10 or 12 songs to tell the story, and every song doesn't have to get all the way through everything. And
Yeah.
so I shared that song. I was like, this song doesn't solve anything. The question at the beginning is still there at the end. That's If you wanted me to be like you, why'd you make me like me?
Hmm.
And so we looked at that song that day.
Yeah, and we're gonna delve into reflection of something that's actually 20 years old this year.
Mhm.
Still, in my top five favorite Christian albums of all time. And I still remember a line. You're speaking of asking questions in a song. There were a lot of questions on that record, and we'll get into that a little bit. But the one thing that the one question that was asked on that record that I still remember even today, and I kind of use it as a way to examine myself, is a line from the song "My Jesus." If Ephesians says that we're to imitate Christ, then why do we look so much like the world? And that's a question I still ask myself. I'm like, am I aiming to be a better follower of Christ, to be more of an imitator of Christ than to look more like the world? And that's still, dude, that line from that song still helps keep me in check now. Am I doing things
Mm.
for the right reason? Am I doing this for Christ, or am I doing this for my own vainglory? And that's something that still sticks with me 20 years later. And does it seem like you released this? You released the first record, Grace Like Rain, in 2003, and Reflection of Something was a follow-up to that record. It came out a couple of years later. Does it seem like this record's been out for 20 years? I mean, is it kind of crazy looking back on something that you've done and say, wow, I can't believe I did that 2 decades ago?
Yeah, it's kind of both. It kind of is like, wait, that seems like just the other day, and it seems like a really long time ago. Um, like it just depends on kind of how I'm looking at it, because my life is so different. And uh, so that feels like a long time ago. But when I, think about some of these songs and that moment, um, that was a big part of my life, and so it still feels pretty immediate. And it's strange um, to think about talking to you about this and go, okay, well, what what was all that? And then realize that all that's still in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, this person was singing and we brought this guy in to do this, and that I remember all that really well. Whereas other stuff from 20 years ago probably is not quite as clear.
Yeah, it's Reflection of Something was the follow-up, the sophomore record that you released in mid-August of 2005. And I remember seeing you. You had actually come through Tampa, Florida. and had done like quote unquote like an album release party. But
Hmm.
I don't remember if I talked to you before or after that show, but we had talked a little bit about that. And one thing that I liked, about the shows that you would do is that you would take time before each song you played and kind of, talk about where you were and what you were trying to say with the song. And I remember one thing that you had said at that concert. Another thing that kind of stuck with me over the years was you were on stage and you had said something to the effect of, I don't care if you buy my albums. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to be a beacon of hope for Jesus and to spread his message. That was so profound to me because, as an artist, you in a band, touring and stuff, that's the last thing I expected to hear. But when I thought about that, I'm like, wow, that's you know, he's doing this for the right reason. And then when I got a chance to sit down with you and kind of delve into these songs back then, um, that's why this record still resonates with me even now because I can kind of go back and listen to this and even remember where I was, when I first heard these songs. I think the first song that I heard was Unchanging One, which was I believe that was the lead single from this record, so I think it was the first one we heard. But Ardent had sent me a pre-release copy of the record probably 2 months before it had come out, so I got a chance to listen to this whole album for a couple months. And it wasn't for a couple months that I realized there was a hidden track on this record because that was like a thing back then. Like I think
I loved
it
it.
as well was like track 15, and you had to leave the CD running in
Hmm.
order to notice that. And it's crazy because it took me 2 months to realize, wow, there was an extra song on here, which turned out to be like my favorite song from the record. I love the way that you did that with the kind of grunge like feel to that hymn. But going back to this record, I'm assuming that you recorded this at Ardent Studios in Memphis.
Hmm.
Is what where you did that? So take us
Yep.
back to that period of time when you were recording and writing this. Was it a challenge to you to have to come up with some new songs for a record? Take us back to that period of time and explain the writing and recording process for Reflection of Something.
Yeah. So Grace came out in 2003. Um, but the thing is, Grace was an indie record. Like I wasn't signed when I made it. I, raised all the money myself and made the record, but I made it at Ardent. And so in the middle of mixing, Dana Key comes in and it's like, we need to talk about a record deal. And so because of that, Grace is just, hey, these are the songs we were playing in worship over that period of time, and we made a record of them. And so Reflection was my first record to be signed. I've got a record deal. My label owns a studio that's legendary. um, you know, whether it's REM or Stevie Ray Vaughan or, whatever, it's all been in that studio. And so I had a great place to work. And honestly, I was just like, I think this might be a fluke. I don't know how this happened. I ended up with two number one songs on the first record, and they're letting me do whatever I want on this record. So I better do all the things that I want to do because this might be the only time I get to do this. So Reflection is really a combination of two things. It's me telling my story, and it's me playing all the music that I love.
Mm.
And so the people that know me well can go from song to song and go, okay, so Something Beautiful is him doing Doyle Bramhall. Um, Blood on My Hands is Toad the Wet Sprocket. And New Name is obviously, just the whole blues scene that I was influenced by. Um, and so I'm just getting the chance to do the things I love and seeing, I wonder how you do this. And so I got the opportunity to do that. And so I pulled the same musical team together from the first record. And So Kim Trammell's back on drums, Dave Smith's on bass. Steve Selvage plays most of the guitars, but Jack Holder and Rico Thomas from New Song, because we had done Winter Jam with New Song and gotten to be friends with Rico. So when I needed a kind of modern electric guitar player, I was like, "Hey Rico, would you do this?" And he was very kind and did. Rick Steff is on organ again, and John Hampton, who mixed the first record, Hardin was like, "Hey, would you consider using him as a producer this time?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, of course I'll consider it. The dude has Grammys for doorstops, at his house, and so they just put us in a studio, and I was like, "Hey, just try cutting a song or two." And so we cut Something Beautiful, and I think we did something else. I don't remember what the other one was. Um, but we are obviously already like taking steps forward from the last record sonically. And so it's a great team, and I still love all those people. Hampton has passed away now, but they're all phenomenal musicians. They're all honestly musicians that should have never been playing with me. Um, but when I did my first record, it was an indie record. I shouldn't have had anybody playing with me. But
Mm.
Dana Key had heard me and taken me to lunch. And so when I wanted to do the record, he helped me get players that shouldn't have been playing on my record. And so they were the real Memphis guys.
Mm.
And I brought Kim in with me because she's phenomenal. And and we just started putting it together song by song. And I still I listened through it getting ready to talk to you, and I had forgotten one of the things I love doing is finishing a song and continue to play for another minute or two and just let
Just
everybody,
jamming.
yeah, just let it go. And in that always drastically change something, like like bring a big song way down or ramp something up or change the feel of it, and then just see how the musicians fill in. And listening to it, I was like, oh, I'd forgotten I'd done that so many times. um but then also remembering, like, because we did that on When Love Comes to Town. We cut that U2 song for a Sparrow project, but we cut it live. I mean, 80% of that track is one take. Um, and so we're doing that jam out with all of us. But on reflection, that's not what's happening. It's just me, Kim, and Dave, me, bass, and drums. And we finish the song and just keep going. We make up our own parts. And then other people come in over time and add their magic to it. And that's not what it feels like. It feels like a band that just kept going. And it just reminds me of how phenomenal those musicians were and what a pleasure it was to get to work with them.
Yeah, Rico's a good guy. I got a chance to, he actually just retired from New Song recently. He's
Hmm.
came off the road, and I interviewed him a couple of years ago because I'm a guitarist. I've played guitar for almost 30 years, and I wanted to interview somebody who I understood from a music level, and so him and I got a chance to catch up on the Winter Jam tour a couple of years ago in Tampa and talk about guitars. I had no idea he played on that record.
Hmm.
I'm sure I read it in the liner notes and just like breezed right over it, but that's actually cool. He's such a great guy, and
Yeah.
your live band that you had at the time. I remember Cody Spriggs was on that tour with you.
Hmm.
Jonathan Chu, phenomenal violin player. Haven't seen him in years. Last time I saw him was Skillet a couple times after he had went on and carried Job, I believe. But you know, I remember the first time I listened to the record, and I think what really drew me to it, and it's kind of a question people ask me now, like when I refer this record like something really good to listen to, they're like, "Well, what kind of record is it?" I'm like, "Let me tell you something. You really can't nail down Reflection of Something as one specific style of music. I mean, this record, tells a story, but it tells it with so many different musical genres and compositions that you really can't narrow it down to one style of music. And I think that's what I really liked. It's like, okay, do I want to listen to rock today? Do I want to listen to some hymns or praise and worship? Okay, I got an idea. I want to listen to a little bit of everything all on the same record. And that's what this was. And I think that's what really, drew me to this record, is that, you got some rock, you got some folk, you got some blues, and then you've got, hymns thrown in for good measure. And I'm kind of curious, my favorite tracks from this record, obviously this was for me, it was always a record that I can listen to from beginning to end being it as well now that I knew the track was there. But some of my favorite tracks from this record were "Blood on My Hands," which you also have, the Fanny Crosby song "Near the Cross" thrown in, which I love. I mean, that's going back to the first record. "Amazing Grace" had been done by so many people, covered and stuff, covered that song that it kind of grew stale to me. But then when I heard that version, I'm like, wow, I never thought that I could love this song as much as I did again, but you put a spin on that really made me fall in love with that hymn all over again. And with Blood on My Hands, you have the Fanny Crosby, Near the Cross thrown in there, which really added a whole new dynamic to that hymn. That was a hymn that I grew up, listening to in church. Unchanging One, of course, was the first single that I had heard from the record. Great song. In the Middle of Me, great uplifting song. Another question song, asking questions and stuff. Of course, It As Well, the hymn by Horatio Spafford. You have your own like kind of grunge type spin on that song, which I've always loved. But My Jesus was the song that really stuck out to me on this record because to me, it was an up in your face asking questions like, do we serve the Jesus of the Bible, or do we serve the Jesus that the world portrays? And it had so many questions in it. And one thing and I think I asked you this when we talked about the record years ago, but My Jesus had some really in your face, step on your toe lyrics, but there was one lyric on there that radio didn't play the version of the song that was on the record, but the line
Yeah.
where Jesus spent his time with thieves and sluts and liars. I always thought, I'm like, wow. And I had to rewind it at first. I'm like, did he just use the word slut in a song? So I like rewinded. I'm like, you know what? Absolutely true. Jesus did spend his time with those in the least of these. And, going back to that song, were were you angry at the way that things were going on around you, like the way that Jesus was portrayed? I mean, where did that song come from, My Jesus? Where did the message and like inspiration for that particular song come from?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about My Jesus is it was old. I'd written it long before um, even Grace. I mean, years and years. That song was probably 8 years old by the time
Mm.
Reflection. We were working on Reflection, and and it did come out of a time when I was frustrated. Um, I was working at a church, and it was wealthy and pretty, and um, I was having a hard time reconciling some of the values with what I was reading in the Bible, what I knew the word to say, and so I wrote My Jesus and played it a little bit, but um, I really think that God needed me to grow up and mature before I was ready to actually present that message, because I didn't need to present it as an angry young man. I needed to
Mm.
present it as a mature man that loved the church and understands the value of that and is not trying to um, condemn it, but is trying to make his bride beautiful.
Hmm.
And and I had that time over those years, and but still, like, it wasn't part of the plan. The record was almost done, and I think we were on the Jam tour in Birmingham, and I mean, we're out there with, with very popular rock bands with big teenage followings, and we're the three-song opening act, and it was an honor to be there. But um, one night I just kind of came in and I'm like, guys, I think we need to play My Jesus tonight. And of course, my band's like, "Oh, absolutely, let's go. What key's it in?" And
Mm.
so we walk out there, and this place is going nuts, and we play it, and you could hear a pin drop. I mean, the whole, tens of thousands of people just shut down. And so we drive home from Birmingham to Memphis because that was the last show of that weekend, and went right to the studio and was just like, "Hey, I need to cut this song because that just happened. And I think, even though this is an old song, I think God might be doing something." So we just
Mm.
tacked it onto the end of the record and then turned the record in. But it's literally just like a live version of me and the road guys coming into Ardent. And so we turned the record in, and Nashville calls back immediately and goes, "This is the song." We're
Mm.
like, "It is? Are you sure? Did you listen to the whole thing?" Because I am surprised that it is the song. They're like, "No, this is what everybody needs to hear, but we need you to put the team back together and go back and record it like you recorded all the rest of them." And so we made that version. And I did the edits. So like the radio edits were not done to me. I know that no Christian radio station is gonna play a song with the word sluts in it. Um, and so I made that edit. I actually had a friend, I made a friend over the years that was doing ministry with um, sex workers in uh, Las Vegas, and when she heard it on the radio, she was so angry that she reached out and she's like, "They took this out of your song. That's our favorite part." I'm like, "They didn't do it. I did it," because they would have never played it with that in there. But it
Yeah.
turned out that for that group of people, the fact that that was in a song actually meant a lot personally to them. And other people, it's obviously a questionable decision. At 54 years old, I recognize, hey, that that did not just win me friends. That made some things more complicated for me. There might have been a lack of wisdom in some of that. Um, but I also got to have some really hard conversations, and
Mm.
um, and to go, hey, look, this isn't my opinion of these people. This is, unfortunately, sometimes the church's opinion of these are the names the church can put on these people. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's their opinion of themselves. And the point here is that Jesus chased those people. Jesus loved them. And and so I hear, yeah, there's that line, and then there's the line at the end about that Jesus wouldn't be accepted in my church.
Hmm.
And those are the two lines that I heard about for years, honestly.
The blood
I've,
and the dirt on his feet might stain the carpet. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I've had to go back and apologize to, my uh, management team, because like they got angry phone calls for a year. And I didn't know. They were just taking the bullet for me of people that were upset about some of the things I said. Um, but there was also a whole lot of many more people that came and said, "Hey, that's what we need to hear right now," and and I'm not saying that I plugged into anything that was absolutely right or awesome, or that I handled it correctly. Um, that's just the song that I had, and honestly, I was more surprised by any than anybody by the impact that it ended up having.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those songs, and it's a song that I always remember. It's a song that really stuck out to me because for me it really it asks a lot of tough questions. Like are we serving the Jesus from the Bible? Or are we serving a man-made Jesus that our society has created to, serve propagandic purposes? And it's like eh, the reason why I love going back and listening to this record is even 20 years later, this record really challenges me now. Like if I'm going through a period of time where, I told you pre-interview that, I lost my wife to COVID and my first wife to COVID in 2021. I had a lot of questions. I'm like, okay, God, like, why? Why? I had a lot of why questions. And I'm like, where do I go from here? What now? Where do I go from here? Is what my pastor told me. He's like, don't ask the why questions. Ask the what now, God. Where do I go from here? And this record was something that I could always go back to and listen to. And it's like, okay. Okay. Help me kind of get through that period and navigate a lot of the questions that I had, and I think that's why it's such has such an impact on me still. And the My Jesus song was one of those songs like, okay, uh, am I serving the Jesus of the Bible or am I serving my own version of Christ? And I think it's just as relevant I think it's even more relevant today than it was when you first, put that song on the record. It's like these questions are still questions we can ask today. And, I know that's probably one of your favorite songs from the record. I know this is kind of like picking a favorite child, but, were there songs from that record that, you look back now and like, man, I'm really proud of that song. I'm really glad that that song was included on this record.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time my favorite was probably Isaiah.
Mm,
Because I mean, as much as my career had success as kind of a rock and adjacent sounding artist, I was a worship leader, and
yeah.
I just kind of accidentally happened into the radio part of it, and so Isaiah, for any worship leader, Isaiah 6 is one of the passages that we love and study,
Hmm.
and so to turn that into a song was a real joy. It meant a lot to me. Um, and then over the years, I mean, new name meant a lot to me. I'm adopted, and so to the the metaphor of adoption for uh, atonement and salvation has always been a very powerful thing for me. And so um, to get to address that was really important to me. I was surprised a few years ago when I was working. I was playing a show somewhere, and I was just going, I should pull out some deep cuts, and like what's something I haven't played in a really long time. And I pulled out "Fullness Found," which is like the next to last song on the record, and the song that most people don't know or skipped to get to My Jesus. And
Hmm.
uh, and I was surprised. I was like, oh, I really like this song. This song means a lot to me. The music of it and this idea that um, it's because it's kind of an exploration of the idea of whatever your question is, Jesus is the answer.
Hmm.
Um, but hey, what if we take that a little deeper and actually dig into what those questions, what those hurts, what those needs are? Um, you mentioned Unchanging One.
Hmm.
That's always been special to me for a weird reason that most people don't know about. Because the first version of this record had a song called Beautiful. It was written by Nathan Cochran, who's the bass player for Mercy Me. And it's a worship song that I've always loved. And And so I did a version of it. And and then Nathan called me because I'd asked him if it was okay if I did it for the record. And then Nathan called me and said, Todd, I hate to do this to you, but is there any way you could not put that song on the record? Because I just got offered a record deal as a solo artist, and that's the song they want me to do. And I'm like, of course, man, it's your song. God gave it to you. It's your thing. But then after I hung up the phone, I was like, oh, man, I love that song. And I was really disappointed, and I loved the track. And so what I did is I had a trip coming to Texas, and so I just took the vocals off the track and left the track and drove to Texas and listened to it over and over. And I wrote Unchanging One on top of the track that I'd already built. And so that's where Unchanging One comes from. Um, is that I had a whole track and just had to figure out how to write a song on top of what was already there. And then, when we did From Grace to Glory, the kind of greatest hits record, I got to go back and put the original version of Beautiful on that. And so people can hear what is sounded like the first go round and then what it turned into.
It's almost like hearing a demo of a song. Like, wow, this music's familiar, but the lyrics, these lyrics are totally different here.
Yeah.
I remember getting a copy of From Grace to Glory, and it was cool that I think there were a couple new songs on the record, but most of them were the ones that had been from previous records and everything. But I remember hearing that, and I remember you had told me that story, I think a couple
Mhm.
of years um, before you released the version of the song. And I think I remember I asked you back then, I said, do you ever think you'll release that? And your answer was, who knows, maybe someday. And then a couple of years later in 2017, sure enough, that ended up being on there. I'm like, it's cool to hear the culmination of this song. And what it was originally at, then what you wrote the new lyrics for, and then going back and actually being able to record the song. So, and that kind of brings me to, one of my last questions for you. 2017 was the last time we heard from you musically, and obviously, you've been, busy, pursuing a master's in seminary and teaching a new generation of songwriters. But a lot of people are curious. It's been nearly a decade since you've released music yourself. Is music done with you? Are you have you ever had the desire to want to go back and record again? Or because I know that you kind of do one-offs and do concerts and stuff, but we haven't heard new music. Is it something that you want to do someday, or do you think that chapter of your life is done?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I honestly, I mean, I was talking about this with my wife recently. Like, when I go play shows, I'm surprised that I'm good at it. Um, because I think I've moved out of that season and I'm like, oh, I was actually good at this. This is something I, um, because like when you grow up, man, you become a husband and a parent and, and they don't tell you this when you're 25, but hey, you're not going to be good at those things. Like it's just hard. Like like it doesn't matter what kind of person you are. Like marriage, parenting, all those things, they're really difficult and you're not going to be great at it. So it's been funny to step back into an environment and go, "Oh, I'm naturally just good at this. This is fun." Um and so I'll keep playing shows when people call. Um I've been I've been thinking about um, even just with the writing stuff, realizing, hey, that's just a muscle that I've let atrophy a little bit because I've been so busy with the academic side of things. Um, and so I've kind of put some of those things back in my life. I joined a songwriting group here in town, just that it will make me start writing on a regular basis again because that was my life then. I didn't have anything else. That was all I did. Um, I came home from tour and dropped the band guys off, and um, all right, well, let's see what God has next, And so I pull out a guitar and start working on the next thing. And that's just not what life looks like now. So I've got to figure out. I've been trying to figure out ways to carve that space back out and get those muscles back working again. Um, I felt like I've been a part of recovery ministry for a while now, which is funny because I found out about recovery ministry because of Grace Like Rain, is that all these recovery ministries around the nation use that song, and they all would come up and go, "Oh, we use your song at CR or at whatever their recovery is called," and I'm like, "That's great. What is CR?" And now years later, I've worked with recovery ministry for a long time and have led worship for it a lot. And so that's one project that's kind of been in my head of doing a record really of songs for recovery ministry, worship and recovery ministry. I think that's pretty close to the alley I've always been in already,
Mm.
and would be useful for the community.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of need to do that. I think there's some great young folks that are doing it right now. I've been listening to Jamie McDonald the last couple of weeks, and man, her voice and her writing is phenomenal. It's cool. And there's so many people doing good stuff. Like I don't need to get in anybody's way right now, uh, but I also, I want to be obedient to what God has for me. And if he needs me to do something else, then
Mm.
I would still be honored to do it.
Amen. Well, if even if you didn't put out another song or more music, the body of music that you've put out, over the last 20 years, really, in my opinion, speaks for itself. If you never release another record, you've got Grace Like Rain, Reflection of Something Better, Questions, Need. The These records really spoke volumes, and that's why I've always been a huge fan because if anything, they've really helped keep me in the direction where God wants me, being able to use these as tools to inspire. And I really hope that the music continues to inspire people in the way that it inspired me. But as an artist, looking back, in closing here, looking back, not only 20 years of this record, but these six records that you put out. Um, what is your hope and prayer for not only people that have heard this music before, who have been a fan the whole time, but maybe somebody that's just now discovering, like has come across Reflection of Something or another one of your records? What is your hope and prayer that these records can be for those people just now discovering your music?
I mean, I think the prayer is always the same, is that people have a need for God. And and if I can somehow musically give them an environment where they can interact with him, they can hear something, they can understand something, um, they can feel like, hey, this song is actually me, you know, and that if God still has some kind of relationship with this guy, then there's a potential for that for me. That's always the goal. No, nobody needs to like my songs. It's still the same thing from the first time. They don't need to buy my record, and as much as that can come across as, oh, I am so humble and I have figured out all these things. That's not what it was. It was very much me. That was for my benefit. That if that tour, if all those things are about selling records, then I don't have a purpose.
Mm.
Like there And what if everybody doesn't buy it? Like, I don't want to be counting things at the end of the night and be sad or disappointed and feel like I've let God down because I only sold 17 records tonight. Like, that wasn't ever what it was about. And they don't tell you those things. Like, that's not a part of the culture's story of becoming a famous musician. They talk about climbing the charts and getting your first number one and all that, but nobody ever tells you, hey, there's going to be a day when your song goes down the chart. What do you do with that? Um, well, if you're just doing what God wants you to do, it doesn't matter. um, just like it didn't matter when it went up. But if that becomes your identity, then it's tragic. And so I'm grateful to still be in that place now and go, hey, I don't know why somebody would need to listen to a record from 20 years ago. There's classic records, there's Rich's records, or there's new cool stuff. Um, but if they happen to, my hope is that it gives them a context in which they can have some kind of conversation with God, and if that happens, then I'm always grateful for that.
Amen. Amen. Well, Todd, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here, catching up with you, and my prayer is that not only your music but just the music of the past just continues to have an impact on people when they need it. And I'm just thankful for your contribution to that and everything that you put forth there. And I'm praying that the Lord continues to use this music, but also continues to bless you in what you're doing now, and uh, helping these young songwriters, this next generation of songwriters, do it all over again, man. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you, and I pray that God's not done with your story yet, man. He's got some more stuff in store for you in the future.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for having me.